We're here with my 2006 BMW X5, and this is the last year of the E53 chassis X5. And in this video, I'm going to be walking you through replacing both control arms. That's both the thrust arm at the front and the lower control arm that's more rearward. And obviously, we're going to take another look at that in just a second, but let's go ahead and walk through the tools that we're going to need and the parts that I recommend. So these are all the tools that I'm using for this job. Starting from the right here, we have a ball joint removal tool. I'm using a fork. If you plan on reusing any of your ball joints, you want a puller or a ball joint extractor that actually pushes the ball joint out. Something where you're not hammering something against the boot, because this will just tear the boot. But in my case, I'm not worried about that. You'll need a nice heavy hammer. I have a mini sledge here, and then also a torque wrench, ratchet, 8mm to remove your fender liners and under tray, things like that that might be in the way. We have a 10mm for your headlight level sensor, 16, 17, 18mm, as well as a 21 and 22. The 17 is just for your wheels. And then we have a T50 Torx and a 6mm Allen. Right here I have two box wrenches, and now these are going to be 21 and 22mm, which convert to 13/16 and 7/8 respectively. I'm also going to be using one of these to make my life a little bit easier, but power tools are absolutely not necessary. But you may also want a breaker bar or a very long ratchet, just in case your nuts or bolts are really stuck on there. So for this job, I am using Miley parts. This isn't sponsored or anything. I just want to talk briefly about the different brands that are available. Miley, I've had good luck with in the past. One thing that you need to know is that Lemforder is the original manufacturer of all the bushings and arms in the car. And those bushings, specifically these back here, on the original OEM parts are liquid filled, they're fluid filled, they're filled with an oil. And that dampens a lot of the vibration, a lot of the harshness that you might feel from the road. And so they feel a lot softer, but in turn, they're a lot more fragile. They have a higher tendency to fail, they can leak that fluid out, and there's not as much solid rubber holding that bushing together. A lot of, if not all of the aftermarket bushings are not fluid filled besides Lemforder. And these Miley bushings are no exception. But the benefit to that is they are much more durable if you're using these for any sort of towing or in a setting that you might be driving on rougher roads with a lot more bumps. These will last a lot longer. But the trade-off, obviously, is a little bit more harshness. But if you, like in my case, are driving an X5 with over 200,000 miles on it, these will still be an enormous improvement in ride quality. So it's likely you would never even know the difference. Another thing you might notice is there are separate ball joints down here. These are separate for the forward control arm, whereas it's built into the rearward one. And this is actually a really good thing. This makes it a lot easier to do this repair. You can actually do this without removing the CV axle, which if you've ever worked on an all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive car, that's a huge deal, because removing those axles is always a pain. And the more work you can do without having to remove them, the better. We're going to go ahead and start by removing the front wheels. All right, so here we are under the front of the car. I just wanted to give a good view of what we're working with here. So this here is what I'm referring to as the forward control arm, and this one here is the rearward. Forward, rearward. In my case, these are original all around, and this one also has a BMW stamp on it. However, this one does not have a BMW stamp on it, and it says March of 2020. So it's a couple years old, and if it is cheap aftermarket, which it sure appears to be, it's entirely likely that it is shot regardless. Because cheap aftermarket is not the way to go on these cars. It will not last you. So we're gonna start with the rearward lower control arm here, since it's gonna be the easiest. So we're gonna start with this 22mm nut on top of the ball joint, which I'm choosing to use an impact, but you can definitely do this with hand tools. And then I'm gonna put our ball joint removal fork right in between the spindle and the arm, and I'm gonna hammer it in. There we go, it's pop free. We also have this little 10mm nut that holds on the little lever arm for our headlight leveling sensor. And this should only be on the front right side. You won't run into this on the left side. There we go. That is free. Now we're gonna go ahead and remove this bolt. So on this side, it is 18mm, and the bolt head on the opposite side is a 16mm. There we go. And on this side, this bolt also supports the attachment bracket for that headlight level sensor. Now we're gonna go ahead and take our new arm. I'm gonna thread the ball joint through first and then just put that nut on top to hold it in place. And then we're gonna get our bolt threaded back through, making sure that we're going through the bracket for the headlight level sensor. Once we get it all the way through, we can go ahead and start that nut on the very end. And for the bracket, for that headlight level sensor, there's a little extrusion that fits into a hole in the subframe, and that holds that bracket in this position right here. If it's not in that hole, it'll slop down like that. So you gotta make sure that it's up in the hole, and then we're gonna just snug this nut down. We're not torquing this yet. We're gonna snug this down. Then we're gonna take the arm for the headlight level sensor. We're gonna put it in its special little spot right there, making sure that this arm is going up and down. And we can take our 10mm and go ahead and tighten that down. Now we're gonna go ahead and tighten up this ball joint. One thing to note, if you've ever done these ball joints before, is the ball joint will actually just spin if you try to tighten this down, so you have to hold it with something. And so I'm gonna use this 6mm Allen socket. It's gonna go right in the top. Then I'm gonna use my 22mm, or in this case 7/8, to actually turn that nut. And now you can totally use an impact wrench to get this on here. I wanna show you the correct way to do it with hand tools. Now at this point with this snugged, we can go ahead and torque this. Again, we can't torque this yet until it's on the ground, but this is going to torque to 59 foot-pounds. And if you don't feel like waiting in the video for when I set the car on the ground, this bushing torques to 73 foot-pounds. So 73 foot-pounds at the bushing and 59 at the ball joint. So now we're gonna go ahead and move on to our forward control arm right here. And again, we're gonna start on the ball joint side, but instead of doing the typical ball joint removal procedure, since I'm replacing that ball joint as well, we're just gonna remove that ball joint from the spindle. So what we're looking at here is the ball joint that actually mounts to the spindle, and you'll see that that ball joint, instead of going through the spindle, it goes through the arm. And that means that that ball joint is mounted with a plate to the spindle itself via two T50 Torx bolts. And the reason that's really nice is right above this joint here is our CV axle. And on a lot of four-wheel drive cars, they don't do this, and you actually have to remove the axle to be able to get this out. So this is actually really nice, but we're gonna go ahead and zip those out. I'm actually going to try to use a chisel to separate the plate from the spindle here. Okay, so I've been absolutely wailing on this thing with a mini sledge for probably about a half hour now. This ball joint is pretty firmly pressed into the spindle, and I think I've just finally started to get a little movement from it. And because of that, I wanted to show you where I had the best results hitting this arm. First, I had the car lowered a little bit, and I was able to just sneak the sledge in right here and strike right behind our tie rod, and without hitting our axle or our other control arm, I was able to sneak right in there. But you're not able to get a whole lot of wind up right here in the wheel well. But I think it is important to hit it a couple times from that direction. I struck it this way a couple times, although that's not really hitting it in the right direction at all. And probably all that shock is being absorbed by our bushing up here. But the other direction that I was striking it, that I think was working pretty well, was from here and hitting against this. Like that. I'm gonna try again to get a chisel worked into there. We're getting a little bit, it's broken loose. I also put some penetrating fluid all around the area. I think we did it. Nice. All right, now, with the hard part out of the way, we're gonna go ahead and unbolt the bushing from this end. On your car, if it's fully intact, you'll probably find that you have a bunch of plastic in the way that you have to remove. Firstly, this under tray, this should wrap all the way around here, and you'll have to drop this down. It's just a couple pieces of 8mm hardware, and this whole tray comes down. And then you might also have to swing the fender liner out of the way. In my case, it's all broken, so I can actually get right on this. So one thing to be aware of that is different over here on the left side of the car is this bolt. In order to get this out, you're gonna have to remove this plastic duct through here, which means you're definitely gonna have to remove the fender liner, at least partially, on this side to be able to get that out. And as you can see through this nice hole that I conveniently have in my fender liner, it's just held in with two. Those look like 8mm to me. So I'm gonna be able to take those out and probably move this enough out of the way to get that out without taking the fender liner out again, just because my car is broken. But yeah, that is something else that is gonna have to come out on the left side of the car in order to give you access to remove that bolt. These are both 21mm, the bolt head and the nut, which is a little bit inconvenient because not a lot of people have duplicate sockets, but what I do have is a 13/16 wrench, which is interchangeable with 21mm. I should be able to get us started here. And go ahead and remove the old arm. At this point, we're gonna go ahead and start by installing the new ball joint into the spindle. But I'm just gonna go back and forth. I'm gonna go back and forth between each of these bolts to draw this into the spindle nice and straight. And then these are gonna torque to 44 foot-pounds. Now we can go ahead and stick our new arm in. And then getting this ball joint on might be a little tricky, but it's just gonna be a matter of turning your steering back and forth a little bit. It looks like with your steering geometry straight, it should just slide right on there, no problem. And then just like our other ball joint, we're gonna use a 7/8 box wrench and then our 6mm Allen, and we're just gonna tighten that down. And then just like the other ball joint, this 22mm nut is going to torque to 59 foot-pounds. And so we're all done. Everything's in the car, everything's replaced. The only things we have left is to torque these two bushings, which we are going to do on the ground with the suspension under load. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the wheels back on, I'm gonna lower the car down, I'm gonna actually drive it forward and backwards a couple times, forward and backwards to get that suspension to level out so that the tires aren't cupped in like this. And then after that point, I'm gonna crawl under the car and torque these. So the front one, your thrust arm, your forward control arm, this bushing torques to 121 foot-pounds, and the rear lower control arm bushing torques to 73 foot-pounds. So 121 foot-pounds at the front, 73 at the rear. So that's everything it takes to replace the front control arms in your E53 X5. This should solve any issues with shutter or movement in the front end that you can feel under braking or acceleration or any clunks or bumps that you are hearing. So I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe down below. But thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.